and it's great to see you all. In person would have been a lot better, but we now are pretty good at Zoom meetings. So let's hope this will work. I think I can see you all, which is most important, which is really good. First of all, I would like to remember our kaumātua, Peter Paku, who's passed away. And personally, I'll go a long way back with Peter. He was a tower of strength and knowledge when it came to, in my situation, water. He was just fantastic and always had a word to share. And I'm 100% sure he's a great loss to the community, but also to his whānau and his mokopuna. Being one of the nicest guys I have worked with in this space. So once again, we would like to remember him. And on that note, Henawai, if it's all right, if you would like to open with a appropriate karakia, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Kia ora, Chair. Tēnā tātou katoa. Nei rā te mihi mahana kia koutou. Hui hui mai nei. Ai tautoko I tō kōrero Jeff. Moi mai rā e te koro. Ki te whānau pane mutunga kore te aroha kia rātou. Te whānau paku ki rua hapia. Tēnā rā tū koutou katoa. Ai, me karakia tātou. Whakataka te hau ki turu. Whakataka te hau ki tonga. Kia mākina kina ki uta, kia mātaratara ki tai, e hiaki ana te ātakura, he tio, he huka, he hau, si hei mauri ora.
Thank you very much, Henawai. That's much appreciated. Are there any notices that we need to be aware of? If none, apologies. I've got one official apology, and that is from Tanya Hoffman. Are there any other apologies?
I have an apology from our alternate, Nigel Simpson.
Okay, thank you. Okay, can I move that we accept these apologies? Thumbs up, everyone. Here's my thumb. Great, thank you. Accepted. Okay, then we go to conflict of interest declaration. Is there anyone who would like to declare a conflict? If not, great, thank you. That's all good. We then move to confirmation of the minutes of the Clifton to Tangoio Coastal Hazard Strategy Joint Committee held on the 24th of September 2021. It's not that long ago. Are there anyone who would like to raise any issues in regards to the correctness of those minutes? No one puts their hand up, so that's good. So have I got a mover and a seconder to accept these? Malcolm Dixon and Henawai, thank you. All in favour to accept these, please raise your thumbs. Thank you. That's accepted. We then go for call for minor items not on the agenda. Has anyone got a minor item they would like to raise? And we'll deal with that at the end of our meeting. I don't see any hands up, so there's obviously no items.
Jeff,
oh, Keith.
Just that question I sent you this morning, when did we deal with that?
So that's regarding a consent that is in progress with NCC and HBRC, and I'm pretty sure that Chris Dolly in his report will mention that. Is that correct, Chris?
Yeah, so we would ordinarily talk about that during the current coastal projects update. So Jose will provide an update of where that is at, and potentially it may come up in some discussion around the MOT.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chris. That's much appreciated. There are no minor items then. Then we move to item 5, actions from the previous Clifton to Tangoio Coastal Hazard Strategy Joint Committee. Who's leading that? Thank you, Chris.
Yep, so we've got the follow-ups. So was it follow-ups or actions?
Actions.
I've got the follow-ups. Page 5.
Call it follow-ups. Instead of actions, we'll do it follow-ups, okay? Yeah, we'll change the wording.
It says follow-ups on the page. So we'll take that as read. We've put a comment in against all of those. Budget matters, we'll get a bit of a verbal update from the project manager today, Simon. Just noting that the managed retreat report has been delayed due to illness at Tonkin and Taylor, and we've been talking to Tonkin and Taylor about alternative resources to deliver that report. However, it's unlikely we'll get that this year. We're looking at early in the new year. Otherwise, happy to answer any questions on the status comments there.
Are there any questions? No, they're not. Oh, Tanya, you've got your hand up. You haven't? Oh no, that's excuse what. Oh, Henaway.
Thanks, Chair. Kia ora, Chris. Just wondering, so with the delay of that report, how does that ultimately affect the other activities that are happening within the strategy moving forward? And by how much or how significant?
So my at a broad view, I don't think it will. We have had workshops on the content of that particular report with the joint committee. This was more around making this report public, so it is being finalised, ready for public release. The contents of the report don't materially impact any of the preferred pathways that have been recommended by the panel report. So although it's an important piece of work, I don't believe that it materially impacts the pathways as they have been developed. And I think, Simon, can you recall, I think it's been workshopped with the regional council as well. So I think that there is knowledge of what is in the report.
Yeah, I'll just jump in there a little bit. So it has in high level, we haven't actually had everything written up in a single report yet. So there's a bit of a missing step there. I guess for me, what it represents is the primary alternative to what our pathways are currently suggesting. So that's its value. So I think it is an important piece of work for sure. I agree with Chris's comment, though, that at this stage, I'm not seeing it will slow down our strategy.
And I've just got a question. So, and Tonkin and Taylor has agreed to put additional resources in. It's very unfortunate the situation that that they have and we find ourselves in, and they have the capability.
Yeah, so look, one of the benefits of using a larger organisation of Tonkin and Taylor is they do have a breadth of experience. And I had a meeting yesterday with a senior representative of Tonkin and Taylor about their strategy in continuing to deliver the work. So that's being picked up by Tonkin and Taylor, but it will take a little bit of time for the new resources to come up to speed and finalise that report. So that's why we're saying probably early next year, if we're lucky, late this year to finalise that report. So I'm confident Tonkin and Taylor are managing with the situation as best as they can.
Okay. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions in regarding the actions from previous Clifton Tangoio Coastal Hazard Strategy Joint Committee? If not, I would like to move to the recommendation that we accept these notes. All of them, have we got a move and a seconder? Councillor Redstone, Councillor Barker, thank you very much for that. All in favour say aye, or put your thumb up. That'd be much appreciated. Thank you. Okay. We then move on to the next item, which is, sorry.
So at this point, Jeff, it's probably just worth mentioning that I think we have an error in the agenda. The MOT should be an item for decision rather than information. So we just have to clarify that with our governance team.
Okay. And we discussed that, Chris, this morning. So what it really means, members of the committee, joint committee, is that we actually would like to accept this as an MLT, so then we can pass it on to our partner TAs and the Hawkesbury Regional Council. So do we need to formally move a motion that we actually put this memorandum of transition into a decision-making item.
Yes, I'd just like to check with Peter Martin, who's on the line representing the governance team, if there's any technical thing we need to do to make sure it's all correct.
Well, yes, I guess we need to look at it as a decision item. Who will make this decision ultimately? Will it be each council? We're going to recommend from this committee to each council?
That's correct. So the decision, if the decision is taken, the decision would be that it's recommending the MOT to each of the partner councils for their decision at each council level.
Yes, I take your point. So we would then want this item to be you recommending, you were making a decision for it to be recommended to councils. Yes, so it would be a decision item for you today.
Yeah. So is there anything special we need to do to correct the agenda with regards to that? No,
it'd be fine as it is. You just have a motion and a resolution at the end.
Excellent.
Okay, excellent. Everybody's happy with that. I see our deputy chair also nodding, both nodding heads and thumbs up. So that's much appreciated. Thank you very much for that. We'll move on then. So we'll move to item number 6, memorandum of transition.
Mr. Chair, there's a question on the wall.
I see Alwyn Corbin, you've got your hand up.
Yes, yeah. I've got a question on clause 9.4 of that, and just what does 2 council members mean? Does that mean councillors or council appointees?
Through the chairs, the intention is that it's councillors.
Yes, I just wonder whether it should be at least one councillor and either another councillor or council appointee, because you could very well find the situation where none of the councillors had any experience with coastal hazards or any knowledge of it. And if it's just 2 councillors, you just end up with process rather than practical contribution.
Rick.
I think I'm kind of interested in Alan's thought, but this is supposed to be a governance entity, and so its governance should be making these decisions on advisement from technical staff. So if we're going to make it to councillor and staff, we're then changing the nature of it.
Yeah, and from what I understand, we still have a technical advisory group which will have representation of Hastings on it. So that actually will overcome that, Alwyn, I believe.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Jareth, Chair, we've dived straight in. Is it worth having Simon do a bit of an overview of the MOT and some of the key points, and then we move to some questions?
Yeah, I was going to ask that, but Alwyn beat me to it with this question. So Simon, if you can get started and give us a bit of an overview, and then from then on we'll have questions. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. So as we know, the MOT, the purpose of it is to clarify as a memorandum how the parties will work together moving forward on coastal hazards mitigation and implementing the strategy. So basically it gives effect to the funding review outcomes as recommended by Raynor Asher. It's a reasonably comprehensive agreement, but does set us up for a range of other things to happen. We have workshopped this with the Joint Committee. There have been a few refinements since last we met. So perhaps I'll just run through the agreement at a high level and point out some of those key changes. As we discussed, the fundamental proposal here is that HPRC picks up the lead role for implementing the strategy. As part of that, it's also a proposed asset transfer where existing assets that are there for coastal hazard mitigation purposes are also transferred to HPRC, with the overall intention that coastal hazards are managed in an integrated way across the coastline. One little quirk around that is that the Waimarama seawall is obviously outside of the project area, but it's the only other coastal asset owned by Hastings beyond those within the strategy area. So proposing that would also transfer over. Otherwise, it only applies to the the project area. We include a whole range of steps around the asset transfer process, noting which assets are proposed to transfer and their current OPEX, CAPEX and debt where that applies. But the actual asset transfer process will be formalised by a later agreement to pick up the detail around that. We do note in one of our clauses 7.5, I'm skimming through reasonably quick here, but it might well be that in the intervening time some more coastal hazards assets are created. If that is the case, they can also be transferred by agreement, but it's not guaranteed that that would happen. Couple of other little changes since last time we spoke about this. We did talk last time about perhaps the advisory committee being an informal entity. The advice now is that we should continue with the joint committee, the formal joint committee status. So that's been changed to reflect that. We have also built in this concept that as part of this asset transfer process, we are seeking to achieve a rates neutrality objective, which is that there should be no impact on ratepayers just by virtue of transferring the asset ownership, and that's a key objective to achieve. And probably the last thing just to pick out really, and I'm welcome to go to questions after that, is right at the back of this agreement is Schedule 2, and this sets out the indicative time frame that all these steps will occur that the MOT establishes. So starting with this agreement, we need to notify the Minister of Local Government, and a whole bunch of steps then flow from there. Sorry, one last thing I will point out. Before this document can be formally signed, we do have to make sure we have satisfied consultation requirements under the LGA and triennial agreement. Principally, that means checking in with Central Hawke's Bay and Wairoa District Council. And Chris and I are going to meet with the collective CEs on Monday to kick that process off. So this document has been drafted on the presumption that that process has been completed. So we won't sign it until it actually has been completed. I guess that's a very quick overview of some of the key points. Welcome to go to any questions from there.
Okay, are there any questions? Please put your hand up. Councillor Redstone.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions. One is in MOT 6.1C, just wondered if it needed to say, including after consultation with the advisory group or the Coastal Hazards Committee. It just doesn't note that anywhere. It says making all decisions about rating for these works and collecting the rates, including which ratepayers should pay and which amounts and proportions. I just wondered if it needed to note something about after consultation with the advisory committee. That was my first question.
Mm-hmm.
Second question's to do with Schedule 2, and interested to know why we would be consulting on the Waimarama wall. Just wondered if that's because it's outside the area or what the reason for that might be.
Through the chair, I could perhaps have a go at both those questions. The first one, really, I think what we picked up is the firm advice from Reynold Asher that we are looking to put in place an efficient structure here. So he was keen that the advisory committee is not able to slow things down, if you like. It's there to facilitate HBRC in making good decisions. We have put in the advisory committee terms of reference that it has a specific task around advising on that rates impact, but we haven't at this stage built in that hardwired consultation requirement from HBRC back to the advisory committee. So that's, I guess, a thinking behind how it's currently drafted, but welcome any thoughts on whether tweaks are required. And then the second question around Waimarama, the reason that consultation is suggested is that that has a targeted rates component to it. So those ratepayers are currently paying to one entity. They have a level of service they're used to and I guess expect, and there may be some interest in the service provider changing. So it was felt that it was important to consult on that proposal.
Okay, thank you, Simon.
Rick Barker. You're on mute. Oh, thank you.
On 7.6, the parties agree that to the extent possible, the terms of coastal hazard transfer will ensure rate neutrality. The parties will endeavour to ensure that there will be no additional cost to any ratepayers solely from the transfer of the coastal hazard assets. I just want to from a ratepayer's point of view, I've got the rates fixed, that's great, but it doesn't seem to me to cover the point that there may be some works done in the interim or other changes. So I just want to the rate neutrality is for like, and it needs to have some language put in there that if there is any major changes, this may reflect in a rate change with me. So I could just imagine if there's going to be some extra work done somewhere and it's of value to the ratepayers, then they could pick up this and say, but it's no extra cost to us. So therefore, the extra cost could fall directly on HBRC and a general rate. I don't want to have that. So it needs to be a proviso about it there. The second issue is that there's a period here where we know this is going to all shift to HBRC. We've generally agreed on that, although we haven't finalised it yet. But no doubt there will be decisions made in the interim as things progress along. And both the Napier and Hastings councils could make decisions about some of these assets. But I think if in doing so, I don't think they should be able to just make the decision and then pass it across to HBRC. What we've got here is kind of like an interim transfer process. In these processes, there's always clearly understood rules, like as in changes of governments, that no outgoing government can make a major decision which affects an incoming government. So that's the sort of, it's not written anywhere, but it is just part of how we do things. It's part of our unwritten constitution. And I just think that kind of language, something to that effect, needs to be in this document, that neither Napier nor Hastings will make any decision of blah 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 without consultation and agreement with the with HBRC. So just so we all are in the loop, you with me? I know that there's a list of assets in there, and we could say, well, that's what the assets are listed here, and that's it. But there could be additions, extensions, etc., all those things. So just to be clear that we're open and transparent with each other.
Yeah. Mr. Simon?
Yeah, so look, that's an excellent point, and maybe we should have a bit of a discussion around potentially there's a couple of pieces of work that are underway that aren't currently in those tables. So one is the consent for the new sand placement area off West Shore. And certainly the previous thinking was that consent would be held by Napier, and it was being worked on jointly between Napier and the regional council. So I guess the question is, should we be putting that consent in as an asset? And then on the Hastings list, we know that there's work ongoing with the H18, but we haven't recognised that is a potential asset. I guess the issue there is there's no decision either way on H18, and everything is unknown. So the cost, or even whether it will be built or how it will be funded, are currently unknown. But that's an example of what Councillor Barker is talking about. If there was a decision to implement a solution at H18, how would the regional council be involved? So that's something for a bit of a discussion, Chair.
Chair, if I could just jump in to add to that. I mean, clause 7.5 is intended to capture that eventuality where something new crops up between now and then. Basically says that if there's anything else that's not on that list that is built in the interim, that could also transfer, but the page would need to agree. So that's kind of a backstop, if you like, to the issue raised by Councillor Barker, on the basis HPRC could decline to accept something that's not on that list. But would seem sensible to me to add something in there around, any new assets. There's a consultation process attached to those. That would be an easy addition to make if the page agreed to that.
I think if you said in recognition that they're in a process of transfer, then this process of transfer, add the words and just preface what you're saying with the recognition that we're in the process of transfer. Then if something's to be done, consultation, etc., people get it then.
Great, thank you. Councillor Tanya Kerr.
Morena, everyone. Just a couple of things. Firstly, 7.7, typo. It's coastal hazards on the first line, should be coastal hazards.
Yeah.
And secondly, a big general question. Is there anything in this agreement that precludes the regional council from picking up Central Hawke's Bay coastal hazards or Wairoa coastal hazards? Because in essence, what we're all doing in Hawke's Bay is clearly saying to the regional council, thank you for putting your hand up and taking on these assets, these liabilities, these debts. And from my point of view, the future, whatever that may be. So just want to really clearly ensure that this agreement will not preclude the regional council from picking up Central Hawke's Bay coastal hazards, etc.
And through the chair, my response to that would be that the parties to this agreement are just the three councils. There's nothing in here that explicitly prevents further agreements being made.
Can I just speak to Tanya's point? Tanya, oops, I better put this. Can I just speak to Tanya's point? It was always intended that if we do this, we're going to, regional council would be open to Wairoa and Central Hawke's Bay being part of it, but that would be a separate discussion with them and a separate agreement, which would be to build them in. So we've just left the question open, and should they wish to come in, then I'm sure that the regional council would look at them.
Right on. Tanya Kerr.
Thank you. So to clarify back with Chairman Barker, will there be an agreement? Will there be something that the regional council does that clearly articulates they will pick up the responsibility for coastal hazards for Hawke's Bay? The reason being, I don't want to see other councils go through this untangling of what we've done, although it's operating really well. I sort of want built into what we're doing that understanding that the regional council will now look after the coastal hazards for the whole region forever and ever. Amen. Please.
Yep.
I don't think that the regional council can offer that as an unconditional, make that an unconditional offer, because you never know what you're going to get. It might be all very well for you to say this is great, let's make it unconditional, but I do think you need to give the regional council some degree of negotiating room with Wairoa and Central Hawke's Bay. Both have looked at it with some sort of interest, but said we're not there yet. So when they decided that they're yet, they need to come and say to the regional council, well, this is what you'd like to do, and have a negotiation and resolve the matter. But certainly the regional council, having made this decision, taken this step, it leaves itself wide open to do the job. The invitation is there. I don't know whether we need something in here that the parties agree that this could be extended to Wairoa and Central Hawke's Bay if that's what they wish. I wouldn't oppose that.
Yeah. So
I wouldn't say it's a big blanket thing.
So just to add through the chair, I think it's well documented throughout the strategy. It is the intention to expand in the fullness of time once we get the core area under control and working well. And I think from memory in the Rain or Ashes report, it also reflects on the intent to expand that out. But I do believe this particular MOT is an agreement between the current parties. So we can probably report back for some comfort where it is clearly articulated, just to give a level of comfort it hasn't been ignored. And I would certainly share Councillor Barker's view that we are open at the right time to incorporate the further areas along the coast. But
thank you, Chris.
The council decision. Yep.
Thank you, Chris. And I think the Deputy Mayor of Hastings has realised that she was setting a trap for the HBRC that we actually haven't stepped into. Okay, Councillor Redstone and then Councillor Corbin.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Just wanted, I should have said before, I would support Elwyn and what he had commented on with councillors and or council appointees, because we've had a 7-year process here that not a new person would come into it, and all they'd get is a basic understanding. And while I'm not putting anything across on TAG or the staff, there's only so much information you can put on paper or you can actually read and absorb, and you're probably aware of that, Jeff, because you've been in that position. So I would fully support Councillor Corbyn in asking for that wording to say councillors and or council appointee, to ensure that we get a full understanding, a committee who understands the issues completely, you know, and can address them, not just look at a piece of paper and think, what does that mean?
Okay, Chris.
I had a question there. So to be clear, the suggestion is that it may not be a councillor who is a member. Council may appoint a staff member or a consultant into that role. Is that the thinking?
No, I'm thinking, well, anybody, yes, I guess, or a previous councillor or anybody actually that they felt would be handy or helpful in this situation, someone that had knowledge.
Yeah.
Not
so
just
that's probably something we need to just get a bit of advice on, because it is a formal joint committee of councils and tangata whenua. So if we were to incorporate non-council members, I just think we'd need to receive some advice from our governance team after this meeting about whether we can do that or not, and we're happy to send that advice out via email.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. Councillor Corbyn.
Thank you. It may be in here, but I just want to check that there's also transfer of work in progress for completion. And you did mention H18 before, and the need for regional council to give approval of anything that was going to happen there. But if something did start and it was it March 2024 and not completed, does this MOT ensure that it is completed?
I can answer that one. So essentially, again, I take it a clause 7.5, which basically just says if there's anything else that's not on that list, it can also be picked up. So it's just difficult to predict what may or may not change in the next couple of years. So we're keen to have a bit of a catch-all clause to pick up anything new. And I'd expect that would apply to any work in progress as well.
Hang on, I'm just trying to find it, but my screen's shifting around. So does it cover work in progress, or does it just cover assets as they are at the time?
It just says any coastal hazard mitigation assets and renourishment programs, including any resource consents that are not on that list, may also be transferred by agreement.
But what I'm saying is that building is started, there's resource consent, half of a wall is built, the other half isn't built. Will it be completed?
Yeah.
I would have thought, I mean, if you remember that the next step after this is that there is a formal asset transfer agreement, which is intended to actually pick up on that much more detailed piece around where things sit at that time. So I'd be confident we could deal with those specific elements in that agreement when the time is right. However, if to make you more comfortable, we could slip in an extra line there around including any work in progress, if that would make you more comfortable.
Rick, you had a comment?
Could I make a comment, please, Jeff?
Yeah, go ahead.
Elwyn, I think the point about I was making before about the transfer, the interim, and having the parties agree is addressing exactly that point. From an HBRC's point of view, I wouldn't want to see HBRC exposed to a substantial amount of work for which it had no input. So, for example, if one of the parties, one of the councils, decided to start doing some work, had resource consent, all the rest of it, made a start on it without any consultation or agreement with HBRC, then when it gets to 24, somebody says, oh, well, we've done this, here, you catch the baby and leave with HBRC. So it has to be a process where we identify the work, agree to it, and so if it's agreed, it's done. So this is a process that's got to be two-way.
Thank you.
Hey. Would this be time to bring up the West Shore Renourishment, where that would sit?
Yep. So to answer that, that would be an asset, including any associated resource consents. So So there's two ways to deal with that consent. One is we could put it on the asset list, but it's not yet an asset. So that's probably not the place for it. Otherwise, it would be picked up by 7.5, a coastal hazard mitigation asset, including a resource consent that are owned by, say, NCC before the transfer date can be transferred to HBRC. So given that that is already a partnership project between the Regional Council and Napier City Council, I think 7.5 would pick that up.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions, remarks, suggestions?
Yes, I have just one question that perhaps we just need to do a little bit more work on the Napier table. You'll see table 7.3, where for Harding Road and Whakariri Ave, we have a zero OPEX budget. So certainly, I believe we probably don't in reality have a zero maintenance budget, and we should probably do a bit more work to find out exactly what those budgets are so that they can be included in the table.
Thank you. Henawai, you've got your hand up.
Thank you. Hey, Simon, I know last workshop we talked about seeking advice from our whenua representatives around the number of members for the advisory committee. So can you just share that feedback and how that reflects on 9.4 and the members within the advisory committee?
Yeah, thank you. So I have had a discussion with Tanya Hopmans around that point. She was very supportive of the idea that there be, I guess, the ability to have equal numbers of mana whenua appointees and council appointees. She had also a further informal discussion with Mana Ahuriri around that same point, and they also like that concept, albeit as an informal position because we've got no member from there yet. So I know that was well supported as a concept, acknowledging that it provides the option to appoint up to 2, doesn't force them to appoint 2. So there's a flexibility there built in, which was also supported. So the answer is yes, it's all good to go.
And so that would be up to 6.
In
the
total,
3.
yes, it would. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Just one from me, Chair.
Simon?
Just picking up on Chris's question around the Napier City Council assets, I did confirm that. And given that those they don't require, as I understand it, and perhaps Gary or Caroline's there could confirm, but my understanding is that there is no OPEX allocation for them, given that they are a solid structure that doesn't require much maintenance. It's more of an asset renewal approach, is my understanding. Gary, can you confirm?
Yes, hi there. So that's right. I did actually speak to the team about that, and they said there may be a little bit of weed spraying or something, but apart from that, there's not really any cost. And so any of the maintenance will come out of the capital expenditure if the assets do start to fail. So yeah, that they advised me to put that down as zero operational expenditure.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Okay, in that case, can we then move these recommendations that you see on the bottom of page number 10 of the paper? The Joint Committee receives notes of Memorandum of Transition staff report, endorses the draft Memorandum of Transition and the recommendation of the Hastings District Council, Napier City Council and Hawke's Bay Regional Council to confirm and execute the Memorandum of Transition following satisfaction of the requirements under the Hawke's Bay Region Triennial Agreement for the Triennium October 2019-2022. Do we need to make any changes? Have I got a mover and a seconder? Rick.
Just a question. There's been a couple of suggested minor tweaks to the document. So would your memorandum motion it should include words, the text that as with the small amendments, and also make a note that there's to get a report on the issue raised by Elwyn. that might be subject to further amendment by that after considering the report.
Okay, Peter, you've got that that insertion.
Yes, got some suitable words in there, and we can talk about that offline.
Okay, that's great. With that included, have I got a mover and a seconder? Rick and Councillor Kerr. Thank you. Any discussions on this? If not, I put it to the vote. All in favour say aye. Thumbs up. Got lots of thumbs up. And contrary. Carried. Thank you very much for that. It is an important document that we have discussed, and I think there's some really good suggestions come forward that we can look into. Okay, then we go to the next item, which is item number 7, regulatory work stream next steps. Who's taking that?
Yeah, Chair. We'll ask Gavin to take us through that paper. Gavin can just point out some of the key highlights. We'll take the paper as read. Gavin will point out any of the key highlights, and then happy to answer any particular questions. So Gavin, can I hand it to you to take us through that paper?
Morning, committee members and staff. Yeah, so this paper just presents a high-level overview of some next steps following on from the regulatory workstream reports that were presented to the committee about 15 months ago. They were 2 reports from Mitchell Dace Limited, one looking at the consentability of our short and medium-term preferred pathways, and then another report on the policy and planning instruments that are upon us. This particular paper focuses on the latter, the policy planning documents, and more particularly, what are the opportunities arising in terms of the Hastings District Plan, the Napier District Plan, and the Regional Council's RMA planning documents, which are currently the Regional Resource Management Plan and the Coastal Environment Plan. Mitchell Dace's report identified 2 key kind of themes to some improvements to those planning documents collectively, and they're outlined in paragraph 4 of my paper there. Basically, greater recognition of enabling our preferred short and medium term pathways. So for example, if beach renourishment was on the agenda, then maybe looking to make rules around beach renourishment in those locations a bit more permissive, not outright permitting them, but more permissive than a high level consenting part. The other dimension was to look at avoiding future development, future land use, particularly intensification, in known dodgy locations that may undermine our longer term outcomes, often referred to as this moral hazard. I've put in a table summarising the status of the Council's current RMA planning documents, so it's just a short, succinct summary there. Nothing really happening in terms of coastal stuff for the Hastings District Plan, but our near-term immediate opportunities lie in the review of the Napier District Plan and also the Regional Council's development of its combined planning document, which is called Kotahi Plan. As far as the Regional Council goes, there is no resourcing, no capacity to do a one-off special amendment to our planning documents earlier than the Coastal Plan Program. At Kotahi Program, the Kotahi Plan is in preparation to cover off air, land, freshwater, coastal, marine, all sorts of things. Quite a big task, aiming to pull all those things together in a publicly notified document by the end of 2024 to comply with some freshwater directives from the government. My paper also just provides a brief commentary on some RM reform stuff that's happening, albeit a little bit slower than central government had anticipated. That's just there for your information or situational awareness. Personally, I wouldn't be holding my breath that RM system reform will deliver any silver bullets for us and our immediate needs to improve our planning documents. So the focus should remain on tweaks, improvements to our Napier District Plan, and also building some better stuff, better policies, better rules into our Hawke's Bay Regional Council Katahi plan. That's kind of it in a nutshell. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. We've got one hand up, Councillor Redstone.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just on the comment on the status of council's RMA documents on that table, it says review of HPUDs. I understood that there is no review of HPUDs anymore. It would be superseded by the spatial plan, but I could be incorrect in that thinking. Can we just confirm that?
Yeah, okay. So there's a couple of things in there. There was an intention to commence a review of the Heretaunga Plains Urban Development Strategy now, but there are other things also happening. So in recent times, we've had a national policy statement on urban development that requires the 3 councils to also develop a future development strategy, FDS, for the Napier Hastings urban area, and to do that in the next couple of years. That's a legislative mandatory requirement, whereas a review of HPUDs was just the council's own discretionary choice to do that. As far as a regional spatial plan, regional spatial strategy, the conversation carries on, looking into whether we collectively ought to do that. Where are the resources for it going to come from? So the notion of a regional spatial plan, regional spatial strategy is not a given. It is not a real locked and loaded thing yet, and it may not be.
Thank you.
Councillor Barker.
Gavin, I see the timeline here. I'm impatient. Can we do this quicker?
For the regional council's work program, there's nothing in the our RMA planning program that would enable us to do something bespoke faster, unless there was some extra special sort of resourcing allocated to it through an annual plan type process. As far as Napier District Plan improvements are concerned, I understand that they are still looking to prepare a notified or proposed plan around about July next year.
I suppose the answer is no, Gavin.
Well, I'm in your hands as councillors and the ones who make decisions around resource allocations. At the moment, the resource is not allocated there for an extra special super fast planning fix over and above Katahi.
I think Councillor Barker is hearing you loud and clear. Any other questions or comments, please? If not,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, here, please, Jeff. This is Paulina from Napier City Council. Kia ora, everybody. Yeah, to confirm that yes, the Napier City Council is aiming to have notify the proposed district plan in late June next year. And at the moment, a very important piece of work that we are doing to meet that deadline is the structure planning of some growth areas that we have identified through the spatial picture exercise that we conducted recently, and it was out for consultation. So we're looking at intensification areas around commercial centers within the Napier, and also a couple of greenfield areas that were submitted through the spatial picture stakeholder and engagement process. So we're going to do the structure planning, which involve planning, urban design, and infrastructure provision within the next 4 to 5 months, and then use a multi-criteria analysis, which coastal hazard will be part of that criteria, to evaluate the areas that are going to be proposed for rezone in the short, medium, and long term for Napier City to accommodate for growth. So yeah, that's really the work program over the next 3 years.
Thank you very much for that. Any further questions, comments? If not, can I have a mover to receive these notes, the regulatory work stream next step staff report? Anne Redstone and Keith Price, thank you. Any comments, any discussion? If not, then I'll put it to the vote. All in favours, thumbs up. Thank you, much appreciated, carried. We'll go to item number 8, project managers update. Simon.
Thank you, Chair. This will be very brief, as it usually is. A lot of these matters are covered by the MOT paper, which is obviously a key focus for us right now, and also in the comms and engagement paper, which I believe Rebecca is here and will speak to next. In broad terms, we are making pretty good progress. I guess a key risk for us is we're trying to target May 2022 to get the HBRC Section 16 long-term plan process notified, in preference alongside the strategy itself. We do have a lot of sort of work streams which are swirling around. We're trying to bring all together to make that a reality, but things such as COVID have certainly put a dent in some of that planning work. So it's a risk for us that we may not get the strategy itself all compiled as a single document sort of by May next year, but I'll keep you updated on that. Budget-wise, we're tracking fine at the moment. We had budgeted for a full long-term plan amendment next year, which is now not the case. So budget-wise, we're looking okay, but there are still some uncertainties around what next year will bring. Otherwise, I think most of my updates really are best covered by the comms and engagement update. So I'm happy to take any further questions on that.
Okay. Any questions? Rick, is that an old hand or is that a new hand you've got up?
Old hand.
Old hand. Okay. Simon, it sits sort of in your head, talking about traffic lights lately in New Zealand quite a bit. Is there maybe a room for, I'm not sure how hard or how difficult it is, I don't want to load you up too much, but is there a traffic light system that we can maybe have in the timeline so we actually can have visibility of which areas are at green, orange or red, so that we can sort of see where we actually need to put our effort into? No doubt you've got that in your head. I'm not sure whether you've got such a timeline on your wall or on your computer. No doubt you have a system that actually keeps track on where you are and what we need to do, but so that we as committee members can see as well where we actually have got some pinch points, so where we can lend assistance, we can lend assistance.
Yeah, that's entirely achievable. I do have an overall Gantt chart that's sitting behind all this with all its links and dependencies. So I could simplify that into sort of a dashboard type approach to show you where there are some pinch points and some risks, if that would be useful.
Only if it's helpful. I don't want to create any more work than we need to, but it's just helpful to have that visibility of where we're at to make sure we actually meet that deadline that we're working on, and we try to actually even bring forward if Rick had his way. Any other questions, comments? Rebecca, was that your hand up?
No, sorry, I was moving my mic down to be able to start talking to you.
Okay, no, that's okay. If there's no further questions or comments to be made, have a mover and a second to accept this project manager report. Rick, thank you. And Malcolm, again, thank you very much. All in favour, thumbs up? Thumbs up. Thank you very much. Then we move to item 9, communications and engagement update. Rebecca, thank you for joining us so timely.
Kia ora. I'll just talk a little bit to the paper and then take any questions. So we've booked in our next community workshop for the 8th of December, and this is the second workshop on developing signals, triggers and thresholds. At the moment, we're planning on holding it on face-to-face, but we're making contingency plan in case it needs to be held online, which feels like it's a real possibility at the moment. For our pre-engagement, we've changed the timing around that. So apologies for pushing it out after presenting our approach to the last joint committee meeting. But after we had conversations with panel members, we realised we had more work to do to make sure we get this right, which is really important, being the first time we've formally gone out to the wider community. So for the community-led part of the engagement, we're planning on keeping that moving and hopefully beginning towards the end of December and January. And we're meeting with the panel members next week to confirm this approach. And we'll work with them to develop content to go out to the community. And following that, the feedback from that process will feed into the council-led engagement. And for the council-led part of the engagement, we're planning on holding a workshop in late January or early February with the panel members around how we engage, what content we use to engage, and how we can be most effective, because that's what we felt was missing and was why we've pushed out the pre-engagement. Yeah.
Thank you. Just one comment to start off from me. I think we really have to start discussing with our panel members and maybe giving them assistance in actually giving us feedback and that we are able to discuss this on an online basis. And what I'm thinking is, you know, if you listen to the news today that we could have 16,000 cases of COVID, I think we will not actually meet in person, and we need to set them up in such a way that they're able to we can communicate with them, because the problem we had when we actually tried 2 weeks ago, we had a very poor result and a very low turnout via Zoom. And maybe we need to actually put some additional resources and time to actually assist them in actually working with us in this. Otherwise, we could end up with even further delays. So it's maybe something we need to think about.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Any questions for Rebecca? If not, I see a lot of nodding of heads. Can we then have we got a move to accept Rebecca's report and endorsing the work that she does? Have we got a mover for that? Rick is very busy. He normally puts his hand up. I've got Keith and I've got White. All in favour of accepting that report? Thumbs up. We've got those. Very good. Thank you very much, Rebecca. We then move to item number 10, current cost of projects update. Chris, can you lead your team, please?
Thank you, Chair. So we'll just move around the wall here and just get a verbal update from each organisation. So the first project for an update is Whakariri Ave. So Deborah, I'm not sure if that's you from Napier or one of your peers.
No, that's me, Chris. Good morning, everyone. Tenders are due in on that project on the 26th, so that's next week. So once we've got those in, we'll be in a better position to provide further updates on that one.
So just to be clear, that's tenders for construction?
Yep.
Yep. I guess any questions for Deborah on Whakariri Ave? No, it's good. Certainly a good milestone to be that close to construction. So that's fantastic. Next one is Jose, just to give us an update on the new consent for the sand deposition area off West Shore.
Yes, so can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes, very good.
Excellent. So basically, recently Napier City has reviewed the concerns raised by the stakeholders and has advised that because of the high sensitivity of this project, stronger scientific evidence about the effectiveness of the proposal was required. So this presents a change in the strategy we had for the project, and which was to implement this proposal with an adaptive management approach to assess the ecological effects, and while assuming about the benefits of the activity in terms of coastal erosion protection. So now we've got this advice quite recently, and we need to review the strategy we had for this and makes the necessary adjustment. These will likely require additional studies and obviously more time to develop the consent. And that's something that that we need to scope and present. Also, some of the initial thoughts about what are the possible pathways about continuing further with this will be to include a comprehensive review of the gravel nourishment scheme at West Shore, which includes the gravel, nourishment that takes place, and also the sand nourishment, which is what this consent is about. And also perhaps changing the ownership of the project, which is currently under Napier City Council. So we hope to have more clarity about this for the next meeting, and we'll do further work to prepare new plans for how we're gonna continue forward with this.
Thank you, Jose. We've got one question. I've got a question myself as well. Councillor Redstone, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm being the squeaky wheel today. Just wondered, just needed reminding about where the sand's coming from, Jose.
The sand comes from Napier Port and the Ahuriri Inner Harbour. It's part of the dredging programs of those ports, and it's a free material.
Cool, thank you.
And that comes out of the dredged shipping channel, correct?
Yes, the maintenance of the channel, and currently at the port they are doing capital work, which means which includes the deepening of the channel to accommodate for larger vessels.
Okay, my question was, so there were stakeholders who actually have requested this. Do you know which stakeholders they were?
Requested the additional studies.
Yes.
Particularly was some of the Ngati Parau members. Yes.
Okay.
They didn't request it, but they mentioned it during the. Yeah.
No, thank you very much. Any other questions regarding?
Just a clarification, Chair. We spoke about the Napier Port using their dredged materials for placement of sand. Just want to clarify that it's not all of the dredgings. The dredged material needs to meet a performance criteria in terms of the sandiness of the material. So it's very clearly the sand material that's placed off West Shore, and the silt and other material is placed in their other locations. So just I thought it was worth clarifying that there's a fair amount of effort to go into making sure it's only the sand that is placed off West Shore.
And that is part of the consent conditions, correct?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, so next, hear from Hastings on any developments on H18. I can't see, is Mark?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, Mark's there. Yeah, on the H18 and Whirinaki.
Okay. So at our last meeting, we mentioned a meeting between HTC and HBRC staff to discuss future involvement in this project. So as a result of that meeting, an email has been sent to the H18 representatives from the HTC, summarising all the work that's been done to date, the issues that need to be dealt with, and a suggested way forward. And that suggested way forward essentially is a staged approach with design and consenting to be addressed next, and that sitting reasonably firmly in the H18's camp, with them probably needing to satisfy themselves around the cost of that work in relation to their expectations about what they might be able to do with their properties after the work. That goes back to that point that Gavin made about the moral hazard under the planning and regulatory part. So since that, though, the H18 representatives actually came in earlier this week and met with some of the council staff and governance people here, as councillors, to discuss the content of that email and what happens next. And so they've gone away with some ideas, and our staff are doing some work around what assistance we can give them. So at this stage, it's just still work in progress, and that's where we're at with that one.
Okay.
And I think in terms of there's no new developments at Whirinaki. It's just providing general support and plants to the community.
There is an intention to do a follow-up inspection there in the near future to look at the beach access issue where it's been eroded, possibly putting in some steps just to control the access so it doesn't make the situation any worse. But that's sort of on a slow burn, that one. but summer's here, so it may gain some traction.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments regarding the coastal projects update that we've just heard? If not, can we accept the coastal projects update? Councillor Redstone. Have we got it? Yeah, Councillor Kerr. Any discussions? If not, we'll put it to the vote. All in favour, thumbs up. Thank you. We're getting later in the meeting. I can see people are tiring. So we go to the next item, which is the discussion minor items. We haven't got any of those. So, Simon?
Sorry, Chair, can I just interject just for a clarification? I've just had a message through from Michael DeVos, who's the GM infrastructure, who is watching online. It could have been interpreted that it's a condition of the port's consent that they must take sand to West Shore. It's what we meant by that discussion is the consent for the placement requires it to be sand. So it's not mandatory for the port to do that. They do it through a memorandum of understanding with the Regional Council and Napier City Council. So just pointing out, it's not a mandatory requirement, and they do it through an MOU with NCC and HBRC. So I thought it was important just to clarify that in case there was any confusion.
So that means that even if there was sand in the shipping channel that has actually been dredged out, they have then the choice to either take it offshore or put it at the beach, correct?
Well, what they do is they work through the MOU, and where they find that material, they do place it at West Shore. So it's not mandatory, but where it's possible and practicable, that's what they do in consultation with Napier City Council and the Regional Council.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for that clarification. So there are no items for discussion on minor items and minor matters on the agenda. Nobody has raised any. However, I don't want to stifle discussion. If anyone has got anything to mention or would like to bring to the table, I'll do it now. Otherwise, I'm in the process of actually closing this meeting.
Mr. Chair,
yes.
Governance team here.
Yep.
We're looking at the clause that you wanted to add at the end of the MOT, the recommendation to other councils.
Okay,
actually, could be quite complex. And do we actually need some specific wording agreed to, particularly with Councillor Corbyn's suggestions about the makeup of the joint committee? That could be quite a complex issue. We've got Desiree looking in here too. Perhaps she could join in that discussion.
Okay.
With regard to the situation with Councillor Corbyn, I thought we were going to leave the wording as it was, and we were going to get some opinion subsequent to this meeting and advice to people here as to the appropriateness of having non-councillors on it, what the implications of that were, so we can make a considered decision. So I don't anticipate any change to the memorandum of transition at this stage. With regard to the leaving it open for other councils to join this, the point was made that it was for the three councils themselves, and what I guess Councillor Kerr is looking for is a clause similar to what's in the Australian Constitution, enabling New Zealand to be part of the Confederation of Commonwealth of Australian States, but which was never taken up. So it's like an open thing there. So that's what she was asking for. I didn't think that was particularly complicated. It was just that the parties, I would have thought the parties to this agreement, so all three of us, parties to the agreement, will possibly consider an application from either Wairoa Council or Central Hawke's Bay District Council to join this agreement if they apply. Something to make it more legal than that, but that's exactly what it does.
Hold that thought, Peter. Councillor Kerr?
Thank you, Rick. No, I wasn't quite going that far. I guess I just wanted to hear confirmation that there was nothing in the report that precluded or stopped them coming on
Cool.
board in the future. I was seconder to this, and I'm happy to second the wording as it is. With minor amendments, I certainly don't need a clause or a paragraph that talks about how other councils can enter. That was not what I was asking for.
No.
Once again, I would like it to be explored as to whether it is 2 councillors or an appointees. I'm lukewarm on the appointees concept, but I don't want to vote against these terms of reference going ahead. Memorandum of transfer going ahead, because I think it's a great document as it is. So as seconder, I was seconding as written with the minor amendments that I hope Peter had picked up on the wording on.
Okay, governance team, yes, that's fine. We'll put the recommendations as said, but in the background, we'll look at the legalities of appointees and so on the on the committee going forward. But we'll pass this resolution as presented, and we'll do minor spelling checks in the background.
Only minor.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion that we need to bring? If not, then I would like to ask Councillor Ormsby to close us in karakia, please.
O tēnā koe, Chair, tēnā koutou katoa. We will close the karakia, and I hope you all take care of the weekend. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te atu whai o tō tātou ariki a ihu karaiti me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhi ngā tahitanga ki te wairua tapu, ake, amene. Kia ora.
Right. Thank you very much.